A riveting story of the developmental years of Ronnie Kasrils, Catching Tadpoles, is his latest books, and it helps us gain insights on how Ronnie Kasrils became who he is today, up to the point of going into exile, taking those difficult decisions that I was asking you about. But I wonder sometimes if it crosses your mind, and other people who are not involved in these sorts of things wonder on your behalf and say, was it worth it when you think about it?
I would not have changed the decision at all. I mean, there's some things we did wrong, and if you could live life again, you would do some things differently.
Yes.
I don't have regrets about the decisions I took and the path of my life. The question, of course, is, was it worthwhile?
Yes.
I'd say profoundly yes, because it was about toppling apartheid in the first place.
Yes.
That was the objective, to do away with one of the cruelest systems of race discrimination that the world has seen. Our people suffered, their lives, their dignity, the way they were oppressed and treated, etc. Whatever the problems today, Mr. Modise, that's gone. That nightmare has gone. And we have a society where we can meet like this, where you can interview me as equals. I look up to you, in fact, as a great professional.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious.
But of course, we've had
this is one
interactions.
You know, I met people, you were so like the young black guys I met in Hillbrow. Yes. They had to skulk around just to write, just to have a drink, just to share some music with other human beings, let alone those black intellectuals. People had no freedom. Today, everybody over the age of 18 can vote, which also means that they can vote against a government. They can vote to choose another party, and that's one of the key things. The constitutional changes, the Bill of Rights. One of the things I write about as a youngster in this book, Catching Tadpoles, I couldn't abhor as a young kid being in a playground, enjoying myself to my heart's content, and I would suddenly look and see at the fence young black kids looking in
and denying,
wishing they could be on the swing.
Absolutely.
I saw a father with a young boy.
Yes.
And I felt for the father. I was 7, 8. But I felt for this man without having the cognitive basis and intellect. But I could feel sorry for the man, because I could realize if he was my father, how bad my father would feel. And I could take that little example, and there were millions of examples, far worse, which were about death and dying in agony, short, brutalized lives. We've stopped that. There's still pockets of this. There's still elements of dreadful racist prejudice, but we've got over that apartheid period, and we're in a new era with a lot of challenges, with a lot of inhumanity, with a lot of people without dignity who are suffering a lot of poverty and hunger. But we're away from that period, and we now look to a new era, and the lessons learnt from overthrowing the previous nightmare must apply in terms of how we can make things go better in South Africa today. So absolutely, 100%, I can say to you, I am very, very pleased that I got involved. I decry things that happen in the country today, but I will say to you, it was not in vain, and the struggle must continue.
And I suspect you get asked this question wherever you go at book launches and so on. People say, you know, you've done your part, it's appreciated, you did what you did, but because revolutions are romanticized or struggles are romanticized, then people think that as soon as you topple something, then the best nirvana gets introduced and everything else is going to be substantially much better than what was in its place. So I suppose the argument is the same. in South Africa today, you know, for those who...
Absolutely.
Who are critical of you or want to take you on in such a debate.
Sure, it doesn't flow automatically that you overthrow an evil regime and that everything's now going to be nirvana, the utopia, the paradise. Yeah. You have to continue to consolidate the gains of freedom. And there's this very vital saying in the world today, which applies to America, Russia, France, Britain, Africa, India, and so on. You know, where we talk about the right to vote, and then there's the question of, is it representative democracy or participatory democracy? And we know that the term representative democracy is simply, I have the right to vote, you have the right to vote. We vote once every 4 or 5 years. That's when we elect the new government. And is that all it's about? And the lessons have been absolutely not, unless the people at all levels participate, the participatory democracy, because you can't just leave it to the representatives of political parties to go and represent you and look after your interests, unless there's pressure from the below consistently, from the constituencies, the trade unions, civil society, the youth, the women, and so on. Those who you chose to represent you are going to start forgetting. They're going to just start thinking of their own careers. We see this happening in South Africa. We see how corruption creeps in and people just want to look after their own interests. The answer is that there must be participatory democracy. One of the failings that we have is we don't have the constituencies any longer, where the people of a particular constituency elect the member of parliament who has to report to them all the time, and vote in parliament, not according to the way the party whips say you vote, but the way the constituency wants to see you vote. It's one of the drawbacks. So just to quickly say, we've come up with a great constitution and arrangements, but we've put it into practice. We found some shortcomings. This is one of the shortcomings, and this is where we can see, okay, to improve accountability, the way to do it is not to just have proportional representation and the party chiefs deciding who they're going to field for parliament, but to bring it to the constituency. And it's not going to answer everything. I'm just giving a concrete example of what we must continue to fight for.
I share that view too, that, you know, constituency-based voting would help a great deal.
And then when it comes to your president, could President Zuma have remained in power as long as the years that he did if it was the constituencies that were electing the president? We leave it at present to the party decides, and Parliament then, the 400, who will be the president. And that's where we see a bad president can be re-elected.
Sure.
So we've got to reform our electoral program.
I mean, we focus largely on your earlier days as a young man, until the time of Mkhonto Wesizwe when you leave for exile, and then you go on to do a whole number of things in exile. And get appointed to senior positions within the ANC, and you become part of the core leadership, so to speak. And even after the unbanning of the organization, coming back home, you're tasked with establishing or integrating the defense force, establishing the new intelligence services, and you're part of the machinery of the government. When you reflect back on all of the things that you have learned over the years, including being part of the democratic government of South Africa, where do you think things went wrong? Because the expectations really was that, you know, notwithstanding a lack of accountability and so on, but that the performance of the new government would be much, much better than that of the apartheid government.
Yeah, well, I think the greatest error was the arrival of Jacob Zuma as president, chosen by the ANC, COSATU, and the South African Communist Party. there were already signs that this man could not make a credible president or even minister. And we saw this when Mbeki had to dismiss him because of the corruption associated with Shabir Sheikh and the arms bribery issue. So no party, the ANC and that alliance made this dreadful error. And it's impossible just to ignore the wasted and the derelict years that Zuma created. But it goes back even further. And I'll come to the key example relating to the father of the nation. Head and shoulders above us all, Nelson Mandela, yes, together with Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu, etc. But Madiba was special, and how privileged to have stood by him and to have served him. But he's not blameless, and he wasn't without errors, and I think he had that modesty. I think Madiba made a major error. Having come from Davos in 1992 and reported to the ANC that the captains of industry, the corporates internationally, the presidents internationally were all saying, if you carry out the changes of the Freedom Charter relating to the socialist side of it, redistribution of wealth and land and nationalization, you are going to be a pariah country, you'll be isolated and you'll never get investment. And that was rammed home. And there was a small grouping around Mandela of the ANC economists who went against the approach that had been the traditional one, based on the Freedom Charter. And we had in place the departments to roll out the eradication of poverty, and that came to a halt. There was too much compromise made with the corporates, with the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts. I'm not talking here about, and not saying that there should have been no compromises. Mandela had to ensure, and the ANC alliance had to ensure that there was going to be peaceful transition. Those were very dangerous times with huge violence, but I believe we gave too much. An example, under the National Party of de Klerk and Company, corporate tax was 48%. We brought it down to something like 28, 29%, a huge amount which came down. If it had to come down from 48 to 42, we were giving them something. We would have had so much more in the Treasury to deal with the infrastructural changes, the New Deal, the kind of democratic socialism that we needed, a social democracy. So I'm not talking about the East Germany case or the Soviet Union. We can be talking about a welfare state of Sweden and Britain. We gave far too much to those corporates, and the reduction of taxes, not on the middle class, but on the super rich. So South Africa joined a free market economy that's been ruining the world, ruining domestic industries, creating mass unemployment, and poisoning the planet and the ecosystem other way, which relates to so many of the problems. You have that kind of situation, it opens up huge gaps for the Jacob Zumas, for the corrupt people. So one looks back at what we, to start with Benny Turok, what was Benny Turok saying as an economist and a professor? He had been saying to the ANC through his research, we need a different type of economic system. And he's not saying it's got to be socialist Russia or red East Germany. We're talking about a social democratic approach where there's a stronger state, where we protect our industries, where we pump money into infrastructure and jobs. It's Keynesian, in fact. And Keynes saved America together with Roosevelt and the New Deal, and he saved Europe after the war, not by constraints on the economy and so on, by getting the economy going, which is what then brings investment in. You see, President Ramaphosa is looking to resolve our problems through the direct foreign investment from abroad. But yes, we can do with that. They'll only invest when they see that we're correcting our economy and making it grow in the first place. So I would say, and I do say to my comrades of the ANC and Communist Party, go back, not to East European communism, but let's go back to finding an alternative economic system that's not based on austerities, which is what the world capitalist system is all about, but based on really getting the economy going again.
Ronnie Kasrils, thank you very much for talking to us.
Pleasure, Tim.
And appreciate. Ronnie Kasrils has published a book, Catching Tadpoles, The Shaping of a Young Rebel. And that's all we had for you here on the Modise Network.